Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast about world affairs and the people who shape it. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg, editor of UN Dispatch, and in this show we discuss topical global issues and have in-depth conversations with personalities in foreign policy. Global Dispatches is presented in partnership with Humanity in Action, an international educational organization, and I am a Humanity in Action Senior Fellow. My guest today, Lidia Bastianich, is a chef and restaurateur and cookbook author and TV personality and entrepreneur, and for the purposes of this conversation, most importantly, a refugee. She was born to an ethnic Italian family on the Istrian Peninsula. This is a region on the Adriatic Sea that is in modern-day Croatia. Following World War II, it was ceded from Italy to the control of Yugoslavia, which was under the communist rule of Marshal Tito. As Lidia explains, policies that Tito enacted led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of mostly ethnic Italians, including her family. Historians now refer to this episode as the Istrian Exodus. I include all this background because we kick off discussing a new philanthropic initiative in which Lidia is engaged, which seeks to raise both funding and awareness for the education of refugee children. The initiative is called Adopt a Future, and it was launched by the United Nations Association of the United States, for which Lidia is a celebrity ambassador. Lidia is asking people around the country to hold dinner parties, potentially using her cookbook, which will serve as fundraisers for the cause of educating refugee children. And I'll post a link to the Adopt a Future campaign on globaldispatchespodcast.com and undispatch.com. This is a really interesting conversation. We discuss at length Lidia's refugee experience, which includes living for a time in a converted World War II concentration camp in Trieste, Italy, before coming to the United States as a resettled refugee. And I just want to say I personally appreciated her thoughts on the salience of culinary traditions to immigration and the refugee experience. It is a fun and interesting and powerful conversation, and I think you will love it, whether you are a food lover, a Lidia fan, or just a foreign policy nerd. This is a great conversation. Oh, and do stay to the end for the anecdote about Pope Francis. All right, now here is my conversation with Lidia Bastianich.
Being a refugee and having been helped along the way to come to America and make my way, when I reached a certain point, I felt this kind of desire to give back, to be one of those helpers that help refugee and causes around the world. And the United Nations has certainly been an organization that has done just that. And I've been connected with UNICEF, but also majorly with UNIFEM, the United Nations Female Organization, which now is part of an United Nations NGO, always helping women. So for 10 years, I did events, fundraising for UNIFEM, the United Nations Female Organization, in helping women in third world countries to develop, because in third world countries, the statistics, I think, are that about half of the household are ran by women alone, single women. And so their work, what they can generate, really helps and makes their family survive. So I felt helping individual women in developing their own talents, their own little businesses, that could help a whole family being fed. And so I felt that commitment. And from then, it developed that, in the United Nations, I got to meet many different people that are in the same cause. And ultimately, this opportunity to be a spokesperson for the organization came about, and I said, this is what I really want to do. If my
it resonated.
Presence, it resonated with me. If my presence, if my kind of the opportunity for people to listen to me could generate new interest in educating children around the world, then I am on it 100%.
So, what are you hoping to accomplish with the partnership with the United Nations Association of the United States?
Well, I think number one is awareness. We did a small broadcast, a segment where I talk about, how one could really join and help this effort. And, at my end, it always ends up to food. And one of the projects that is in the organization is cooking meals and fundraising, raising awareness and raising money for UNA USA by doing dinners, by making dinners with your friends in your home, and you raise the awareness. You get these people interested. You explain, and plus, you charge, and that is the fundraising for the organization.
So you're hoping that people just have dinners, host dinners across the country in order to raise funds for refugee children. I think I read on the website the funds basically go to the UN Refugee Agency. And on the podcast over the years, I've discussed often this concept, this idea that UNICEF has been warning about of a generation of lost children who have their education interrupted because of displacement by natural disaster or man-made crisis.
Absolutely. These children get set back, nothing to, because of what they do, but of our world situation. And our future is all about these children growing up and creating a safe environment, a safe world for all of us. So it's up to us to give as much as we can. And I can't tell you how often I get emails from my viewers saying, Lydia, last night we did a Lydia dinner at home, and we each brought one dish from your book, and ultimately we had a grand dinner. Well, how much grander could it be if you did a Lydia dinner that ultimately would benefit these children and the education of these children worldwide?
And so is there a time frame in which you're encouraging people to host these dinners? And I'll post a link to your most recent cookbook on the website as well, so they can get some inspiration for recipes to serve.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd love that. If they would make a Lydia dinner, that would be great. And maybe that would be an incentive to kind of get more attendees, if you will. But otherwise, a dinner, I think I am certainly committed for this whole year, 2018, and beyond, I'm sure. So anytime within this year, I think one could order. So there's not a pressured time, but, just think about it and put it on your agenda, and you can have 2-3 dinners as a way of getting friends together, of you thanking your friends, inviting them, and plus doing this great cause.
And you're hosting one, right, at one of your restaurants?
Yes, we're hosting one, I think is on the 23rd at the Lidia restaurant in New York City. We're going to do a dinner, and of course we're going to do it with my recipes, but it is to fundraise for the United Nations organization to educate these children.
So you referenced earlier that part of the reason that you wanted to get involved with the United Nations Association and these kind of broader global issues was your own experience as a refugee, and also having been helped by people who acted selflessly on behalf of you and your family. So I wanted to talk a little bit about you and your own experience. So where were you born?
I was born, Mark, let me just preface this by telling you that I am still in awe when I think back, when I came here to the United States as a 12-year-old immigrant and having no relatives here, on how welcoming and how giving America, the Catholic Charities, Red Cross, and just plain neighbors were to us as a family. So I was born in Istria. Istria is now Croatia, but it's a little peninsula that is in the northeastern part of Italy, in a sense. Now is no longer Italy, but it was Italy. After World War II, Italy lost the war, and after a few years of discussing the borders, the Paris Treaty finalized the border, and Istria was given to the newly formed communist Yugoslavia. At that point, about 350,000 ethnic Italians left Istria, went back into Italy and on into the world.
Mm-hmm. And I should say, if people can like imagine a map of the Adriatic Sea, basically this is a part of modern day Croatia that's just like directly across the ocean from Venice.
Exactly. If you look up at Italy, the boot of Italy is in the right-hand side corner. It's a little appendage in the Adriatic. That's where I was born. And I was born a few days before the Paris Treaty went into effect. My parents, even though we were ethnic Italians, remained because my mother was pregnant. Where is she going to go into the world at that point? But the Iron Curtain went up and we got caught behind. So my 10 formative years, the first years of my life, were spent under communism. And, communism became quite strict there. The borders, the Iron Curtain went up.
This is like Tito and
Tito, Marshal Tito, and in the beginning he was, then he kind of loosened up a little bit, but in the beginning he was very communist dogma, and so we couldn't practice our religion. We couldn't speak Italian. My parents, my mother was an elementary school teacher. My father had 2 trucks, so he was a small businessman. His trucks were taken away, one and then the other, and so he was not. We were not given an opportunity to be deemed as capitalist. My father was. My mother had to stop the Italian, and she had to absolutely learn the Croatian, or at that time it was the Yugoslavian, teach the communist dogma in class, because she was a teacher from the 1st to the 5th grade. And so all of this weighed on my parents. And I grew up in that situation, being confused and not being, because family at home, we were one. And then outside, we couldn't be ourselves. We were somebody else. And in 1956, my parents decided, I was 10 years old, that it is time to move on. And literally, we escaped into Italy. Now,
can I just ask, in the time of Tito's sort of crackdown against Italians and ethnic Italians in the Istrian Peninsula, did that sort of manifest itself in sort of a culinary form? Like, were traditional Italian dishes sort of frowned upon in any way? I mean, do you have any recollection of that?
Right. I'm just going to correct. It's the Istrian Peninsula.
Pardon me, Istrian, yes.
Yes. And, food is who you are. It's part of, your profile, your ethnic, your cultural profile, of what you cook reflects the area, the occupation. So that part of Italy, if you will, at some point was also going back under the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So borderline kind of countries have a very mixed culinary cultural heritage. So we, as a matter of fact, also languages. We were Italian, we spoke Italian at home, but we also understood a little bit of Croatian, a little bit of German, because of the different coming and going. You kind of were exposed to all of those different cultures. So food-wise, we in our cooking still this day, I cook with sauerkraut, which is very Slavic, but I am Italian. And a lot of time, when I cook it at the restaurant, it says, "What are you cooking with sauerkraut?" I says, "Well, that's part of my little kind of borderline mixture." We make strudel, apple strudel, palacinka, all of these kind of Hungarian desserts. As a matter of fact, when I cooked when Pope Ratzinger came to the United States, and for that matter also when Pope Francis came to the United States, I cooked for both of them. But for Pope Ratzinger, I kind of went to that kind of Slavic German resource to cook for him. So culinarily, a borderline, the people of borders are quite diversified. Yes, they have an identity of their own, but they should be very accepting, because you are exposed to the different cultures.
Well, it's just interesting to me that it's sort of easier for, say, like a communist authoritarian like Marshal Tito to stamp out, say, the Italian language than it is to stamp out other elements of the native culture, including the cuisine.
Exactly, cuisine. They stamped out. You know what his tactic was? That he brought the leaders of that area. He eliminated all the positions that were held by any sort of Italian culturally people, and replaced it with people from Serbia, from the southern Yugoslav country, so that they would have no relationship to or no sentiments for the Italian part. And he changed all the names. So you're absolutely right, but what you cooked at home, they couldn't eradicate, that we made gnocchi on Sundays. We continue to make those gnocchis.
I like a gnocchi as a form of resistance. I like that. Is there a sort of a moment in your family's history, perhaps it's like passed down as lore, that crystallized your parents' decision to decide to leave the peninsula?
Well, I think because as a child you're not told that the family kind of decisions, and especially in a political kind of tight environment, children spill the beans. So the idea that I was told was that we had relatives on the other side of the border, that my mother, my brother, and I would go and visit Aunt Nina, who supposedly was very ill in Trieste, Italy. And that was the purpose of our trip, as I understood it. Now, they wouldn't allow the whole family. Yugoslavia wouldn't allow the whole family to go. They held my father as hostage. They knew if one member of the family would remain, that the rest would return, they assumed. So the three of us went, and when we got to Trieste, Nina was in fairly good health, but I didn't about 10 days later, my father literally escaped on foot, the border, across the border, the white border. He was shot at. He footwise, the dogs were after him. He finally made it, and he came and joined us. And I remember because he came at 4:00 in the morning. The doorbell rang, and there was a big commotion in the house, and there he was in front of we opened the door, and he just collapsed on us, and everybody was crying, whatever, but my mother was crying because he was bleeding, he was this, but we were all together. And that's where kind of the escaping element from communist Yugoslavia was done in our family. Now, we were in Trieste, Italy. We could have stayed in Italy, but I think at that time Italy also was jobs hard to find. So my parents decided that the best is to move on in the world and see which country would take us in. And of course, America was our goal. Their goal. Now, my grandfather, my mother's father, had worked on ships, so he had been to America during free times of Istria and back. And I remember always as a child, he would tell great stories of America.
Do you remember a story in particular that he would recall?
Well, he would, because he came with the ship. He was an engineer for the. I think it was the. Which ship was it? But anyway, and he remember, he said that in America, people are happy that there's jobs for everybody. There's different, there's the Italians are there. There's all different kind of ethnicities. Everybody seems to be happy together. And this kind of, and the country is growing, beautiful big buildings. And he would describe New York because I think most of the time he spent in the harbor of New York. So he, he would.
The seed was planted, yeah.
Yes, he would talk and says, "Oh, America is a golden place to be." And so when my family gathered in Trieste, and the decision, of course, it was let's go, let's register. And what was happening to refugees at that time is that my mother, my brother, and I had a visa, and the visa was to expire in a few days. My father had no papers because he escaped. And so if the police caught us without papers as clandestines, chances are that they would send us back to Yugoslavia. The other option was to register into a political refugee camp, which was called San Saba. San Saba now is a museum. It's outside of Trieste. But before the political refugee camp, that was a Nazi concentration camp. So it was a grim setting, if you will. I didn't know that at the time. We found that after, and we went and presented ourselves as political refugees. We were seeking asylum. Now, I was 10 into 12, so I was just listening. So I recall all of these steps to becoming becoming a refugee, registering, being vetted, waiting. For 2 years, we waited in San Saba in this political refugee camp for an opportunity, for a country to offer us entrance. And in 1958, Dwight Eisenhower was the president. He opened the immigration for people fleeing communism. Mm-hmm. And we were one of the first family in that camp. And it was just my parents were elated, and we were just looking so much forward to this new life.
Were you able to sort of go to school at this refugee camp? And it's maybe worth putting into context this sort of exodus from Istria that your family participated in was one of the largest post World War II displacement crises to occur, to exist. Something like 300,000 people fled that area, ethnic Italians in particular.
Yeah. Well, it was first it became a very frightening place because, you're quarantined, you're separated. We were the male and the female, so my mother and I were separated from my father and my brother. And, as a child, I still remember those emotions. You wonder, will I ever see my father again? Will I ever see my brother again? And then you're reunited. Then you're given this little cubicle amongst a whole kind of floor of little cubicles where families were given. The cubicles were separated by plywood, by cloth, whatever. It wasn't actual rooms, but each one, we had bunk beds, and we had our own little, downstairs was the mess hall. We would, go online for food. We would have, and, we were thankful that we had some place that somebody would feed us. We were fed, and I think the Red Cross, the Catholic Relief Services, all of those organizations, not unlike the organization that we are talking about and that I am involved in, help. Help is needed of anybody that can give it. And they did allow us because then they ultimately saw that we were Italians, ethnic Italians, and they gave us the opportunity to leave the camp. Now, Mark, in this camp, people came from all over communist Europe who were trying to escape. Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Albania, Serbia, wherever. They were, East Germany. They would come and escape and ultimately go to the free world. And Trieste was a big point of gathering, if you will. Italy, I think actually the Vatican had committed to taking care of a lot of the political refugees in Italy. And from then on, so we were given the opportunity as being Italian, once they cleared us that we are not, political instigators, that we are not this or that. We were allowed to go out, and I was allowed to go to school, so was my brother. And my mother, they allowed her to do, and my father, to do little menial jobs outside. She became, she went to clean houses. My father became a little chauffeur just to make money so that they could buy food for us.
And it's worth kind of pointing out that one of the current sort of challenges facing refugees around the world, particularly in host countries like Lebanon or Turkey, is that there are restrictions against working for refugees. But it seems that in your case, because of your ethnic identity, that you were given, you were given the ability to work and earn some money and sort of not have to subsist on, charity alone.
Right. We were given a lascia passare. We were given the opportunity to leave the camp. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of the refugees had no papers and were not allowed. They had to stay in the camp. And we would check out. every morning when we went to school or whatever, and we had to be back by a certain hour and check in. In the meantime, my mother, could get a little work. My father as well, but also I myself, I got subsidized by a local. A good person of good heart. She helped to pay my schooling, and I also, as a 10, 11-year-old, got put into the kitchen with the nuns to help kind of peel potatoes and all of that, sort of to subsidize, to help my schooling. So along the way, you kind of did whatever you could to make your life better, wherever you were given the opportunity, the chance. Because I think good immigrants that are trying to start a new life for themselves, for their family. That's all they want. They want an opportunity, a chance to feed their family and have a safe and warm place to live.
Do you remember the moment where you got word that your approval to the United States has gone through, that you're, allowed entry?
I remember because they used to post outside every morning, the country that was opening and that was looking for or would allow so much immigrants. So I remember the morning my father, I guess, go every morning downstairs in front of the office and check who was. And he came back all excited. He said, America is opening. And so I remember the two of them running down right away at the office. Mark, I one of the things that I really remember about these 2 years and the process of coming into America is how thoroughly we were vetted. They made sure that we were healthy, that we were healthy, in every aspect, that we had no criminal, my parents had no criminal record, that we would be a good addition to the country, and in our case was America. So my parents were fairly educated. My brother and I, we were at the right age to accept a new culture. I was 12, he was 13, he was 14, and so I think those were all pluses. But to ultimately, when they made the application, says, can we apply? Can we go? We began our process of vetting, and we had to go all the way to Geneva, to the doctors, to the American embassy. So it was a long process of good vetting, and I think that was great because it kind of assured that the people that are coming are really honest people that look forward, that need an opportunity to continue their life.
And it's worth pointing out that vetting process, exists to this day, where it takes, years, almost 2 years, 18 months for an application for resettlement to the United States to go through. And it's also sort of telling that whereas in 1958, Eisenhower opened up this, immigration to individuals fleeing communism, historically, the United States has, of course, opened its doors to people fleeing persecution around the world, though that is decreasingly the case in the current administration. But I won't ask you to make any political comments that you're not willing to. But it's an interesting comparison between one Republican president and another to make.
Right, and I do kind of listen and all, but certainly I'm not in a position to know all the details. All I'm in position is to share my experience and to share and know that if you give an opportunity to a refugee that has no home, that has no place to call their own, that has we were Ippoliti. We refused the Yugoslavian citizenship. We had no citizenship. So, we were like leaves in the wind, looking where to put our roots. My parents, as a child, I remember feeling insecure. I says, where am I going to have a home again, like I did with grandma, when I could feel that, that's where I belonged. And so as a child, you feel very insecure. What you do at that point is that the family is very tight, and you cling on to your parents for support and for strength. And what I can share is that if you give these honest people a chance to restart their life, they will do their best. They will give of themselves the most that they can. And I still can't help stop giving, in return, now that I was given the opportunity. And, my success is all about being given this opportunity, my desire to make it work, my desire to be grateful to the country, to America, that gave me this opportunity. And, certainly I cannot speak for everybody, but I know that people that are in the same position that I was, that my family was, all they want is a peaceful place that they can call home, and they will be forever grateful.
So how did you make it to the United States? Did you come on boat, plane?
Well, so the Catholic Relief Services at the time and the Red Cross were providing the travel, the organizations. We went from Rome. From Trieste, we took a train all the way down, and there were quite a few of us immigrants, not too many, but quite a few, down to Rome. There, we took the plane. The Ciampino Airport was then the main airport in Rome, and they flew us to New York, LaGuardia. And so we came to LaGuardia, and we have the Catholic Charities, the Red Cross, awaiting, so we came, for us kids, this landing, seeing the Manhattan High Line in the distance, it was extraordinary. We finally made it to the land that I remember my grandfather talking about. We were finally, we felt, okay, now we're going to be free. Now I can make my home. Now I can make friends. And, in anticipation, my brother and I, we were glued to the window. They had school buses to take us to Manhattan. They put us in a hotel. It was the Walcott Hotel in 30-some-odd Street. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks, awaiting where they would settle us. In those 2 weeks, we went for weekly visits to the Catholic Relief Services, to the Catholic Charities, and they would subsidize us. Actually, talk to my mother, say, okay, here you have, this is $16. I remember the first week. You feed your children and yourself while we await where we'll find you a home and whatever. And we would go to first every second day, then once a week, and they would instruct us on what to do, counsel us. And until after about 2 weeks, they found a job for my father in New Jersey, and a little home for us to go and live. And it was, I remember, it was like a little ranch house right on the cliff of the New Jersey, right across from Manhattan. So this house was kind of down on the rocks on the cliff. It was not one of those. It was a good house next to us. We shared it with a Canadian family. And there, my father began his work. The local chapters of Red Cross, Catholic Charities would help us. The local people, volunteers, they filled our home, all the furniture. Yes, it was used furniture, whatever it was, but we had a home.
And you went to school, presumably.
Yes. They came, the mothers, some of the volunteers came, they registered me and my brother in school. My mother, my father began to work, and so our life in the United States began. Always with the support of the agencies, because we had no relatives at that time here. And we just started slowly on our own. My mother started to work. My father, I remember, my mother was so concerned, and she kept a diary of all the money that the charities, the social workers gave her. And the first, as she began to work, she opened a book, a back book, and she saved the money and went back to that office and said, "This is what I owe you. I want to pay you back." And I remember the woman was laughing. She says, "No," says, "This is yours. We want you here. We invited you here, and you just use this to feed your children and to start your life."
That's an amazing story, I think, of just how powerful and important organizations and even individuals like that are to people in flux like your family.
Oh my God, I still, I can't help but, I don't remember exactly all of those people. Some we befriended, but these people that I never met, that I never knew, that I then went out of my life, how willing they were to come. They came with cars. They brought food. They took us shopping. They took us to the bank to teach us, and especially the Italian American community in the area was called in because, we didn't speak English. And so one of the jobs that my father got ultimately was from an Italian barber shop. Mm-hmm. One of the guys said, "You come with me, let's get your hair cut." And there, all the Italians come, and you will talk to somebody that will have some sort of an idea or to get you a job, and so on. This connections, this networking that happened, it still amazes me.
At the time, how did your own sort of cuisine that you were consuming and that your family was consuming sort of change? And I'm wondering if, the kind of food that you were cooking at home still sort of harkened back to your time in Istria.
Well, the cuisine is always, for me, it's always a place of comfort. I know that when, I asked a lot of time, where did this passion for cooking come for me? And I think I can trace it back to when we left Istria. Now, as a child, my mother worked in the city of Pola, but she put my brother and me with grandma in the little town in the countryside, which was freer. We could speak Italian. Grandma sometimes took us to church because nobody would watch old grandmas what they did. And when we ultimately ended up in Trieste, and I found out that we're not going to go back to Pula, to grandma, I think something happened in me because I never said goodbye to my grandmother. I wasn't aware I'm not going to come back. And food was my connector. I continued to cook, the smells, all that brought back grandma, and food for me continued to be that connection to my roots, to who I am, and I communicate with food. My grandmother fed me with love. I remember all of that, and so my passion continues through food, and I think food is one of the greatest connector that we have among people, among certainly families, but also among people. Eating somebody else's food really brings you closer to that person. I forever thought, being part of UNIFEM and creating those dinners at the delegates' dining room to fundraise for UNIFEM, you begin to realize how food really connects even on a diplomatic level. And I always thought that there's room for food for diplomacy.
That's funny. I interviewed a former U.S. ambassador to Liberia, and she was from New Orleans, and she conducted what she called gumbo diplomacy, in which she would host these gumbo dinners and hash out big, complicated issues over a pot of gumbo. I'm wondering, sort of, if you could transpose the experience that you had in terms of your connection to the cuisine of your grandmother to the current sort of global refugee crisis. I mean, do you expect cuisines of say Germany, where you have a number of Syrian refugees have fled, to sort of change in any fundamental way to reflect these kind of connections to Syria that Germany seems to be, espousing, or other destination countries as well?
Well, as a chef and restaurateur and as a communicator of the Italian culinary culture, I have asked myself, what delineates, what makes the transportation of a culinary culture possible? And there's two things. You need traditional products, the vegetables, the fruits, the rice, the grains of that culture, the oil for us Italian, the olive oil, the Grana Padano cheeses, and all of that. We need that for me to transport the real Italian cuisine. I need those ingredients. And the other element is technique. How do you cook those ingredients? So do you braise them? Do you stew them? Do you make minestres? How? So what usually happens to immigrants, pockets of immigrants' culture as they enter another country is certainly they will continue to cook what they know, the food that they know. That gives them comfort. Food gives you identity and comfort. So if they enter a country and they don't have the products, the traditional products of it, they will try to improvise with the products that they find. Hence the Italian-American cuisine, which is a different cuisine than the regional cuisine of Italy. You improvise as an immigrant with the ingredients that you have, that you find, and you use the techniques that you remember. And eventually, if the community of immigrants becomes large enough, then there's opportunities for little businesses to open little bodegas or whatever to bring the ingredients and all that. But at the end, you cannot deprive these immigrants, and especially the first generation immigrants, even the second generation immigrants, of this connection, because this is what they know, this is what they grew up. The second and third generation might slowly get. So what happens in America is marvelous, because and I'll speak in first person, is that I am absolutely free to practice my Italianità, if you will, in all the foods that I cook, in the songs that I sing, in the clubs that I join, in the areas that I go. That doesn't make me less American. I feel very American and very grateful. And that is the marvel of what America is all about. That, yes, we have America. This is the country they gave us. This is our kind of mother country, and I feel very grateful and responsible. But within that context, I'm allowed to be Italian. And that is the beauty of America.
So final question, because that's a great point to end it on. But I have to ask, you mentioned what you cooked for Pope Benedict, but what did you cook for Pope Francis?
Pope Francis, Pope Francis is Argentinian. So I thought I was going to cook big meats. America is it, nice prime rib roast or whatever. But the Vatican nixed it because he was sort of watching his diet. So I went.
That's a great.
I went to his second. Yeah. Then I went to his second choice. He is Italian. He's from Piemonte. The region that his parents come from is from Piemonte, so I said, okay, I'll revert to Italianism. And so I did a lot of risottos. I did capon stock with tortellini, pasta, lighter fare. But he loved his risotto. I had to make it 3 times.
Oh, he asked for thirds. Well, there you go. You're cooking the food of his grandmother. Yeah.
Yeah, never direct, because a pope doesn't ask for anything, but his confidants, if you will, know what he likes, and but he was great because when you cook this kind of, the pope comes and lives in the Vatican's mission house. Mm-hmm. They don't live in hotels. They don't eat in restaurants. So
because the Vatican has a mission to the United Nations. It's where he stays. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, which is on 72nd Street near Fifth Avenue here in New York. So we had to enter into the mission and enter into the kitchen and cook there. And he would be sleeping upstairs. So it's a very kind of intimate opportunity. It was just wonderful. At one point, one afternoon, after he had lunch, he took a 15-minute nap. He came to the kitchen himself. He just walked down in the kitchen, and the Secret Servicemen were running after him because he escaped, I guess. And he came to the kitchen and he asked, "Posso avere un caffè con voi? May I have coffee with you?" And there was 6 of us in the kitchen, and we just sat there, and he talked to all of us, and it was just a wonderful connection and experience.
What did you talk about?
He wanted to know each one of us individually, our story. Where we came from, what our passion was. He blessed us all. He asked about families. And then he went into his kind of pocket, the deep pocket that they have in those flowing white gowns, if you will. He pulled out a blessed rosary for each one of us.
Oh, that's an amazing experience.
Yeah,
and you told him about your refugee experience, presumably.
I don't think I had a chance because, that takes a while.
Yeah.
He knew, we were Italian. Where were you born? So more or less, he kind of, but I didn't want to hog the time, if you will.
Well, Lidia, thank you so much. And I look forward to either hosting or going to a Lidia dinner for Adopt a Future. It's a great way. Yeah.
It's March 23rd that we are having the dinner at Lidia. So you are welcome to come.
Thank you.
And let's spread the word evermore. And I just ask all of the listeners: food, the table is the best place to be in the world, with the people that you love, that you care, or with strangers to get to know them, and to set up a dinner in your home. To bring awareness to the subject and to raise some funds. There's nothing better, nothing more gratifying in life. So I encourage everybody out there to do a Lidia dinner to benefit this cause.
Well, this conversation has left me both inspired and hungry. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Lidia. That was fascinating. That was really good stuff. I was not sure what to expect going into these kinds of conversations. It's funny. I'm often more wary about having conversations with people outside the foreign policy world because I'm not entirely sure what else, what I can add to it as an interviewer. But this was just an exceptional conversation. Huge thank you to Lidia for taking the time to speak with me, and hope you all have those adopt a future fundraisers. Tell me what you're cooking. All right, we'll see you later. Bye.
The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the policies or positions of Humanity in Action.